Welcome on behalf of all of the organizers, which is Future for Religious Heritage, represented by Jordi and Rocio, and the Commission of the Bishops' Conferences of the European Union, COMECE, was represented by Emilio, he is here, and the Brussels office of the Protestant Church in Germany, which I'm part of, and our head of office is also present, Ms. Hatzinger, so we're very happy that you're here. We would like to look at religious heritage and the European Bauhaus. We're a satellite event of the new European Bauhaus Festival, which is taking place here in Brussels and online across Europe actually right now. Yesterday I've been visiting the stands at the Saint-Contenaire, strolling through all of the stands that they had there, and was very interested in all the newest development in architecture and design and sustainability. What we would like to focus on here right now is religious heritage and how it can contribute to the Bauhaus principles. So if we look at the Bauhaus principles, how can I move here? As you might know, these are being defined as beautiful, sustainable, and together. So as a new way of building and designing and living that is aesthetically interesting and beautiful, at the same time was sustainable, green, that will contribute to the European Green Deal, and together in the sense of socially inclusive. Now, if we look at all of these three principles that should go hand in hand with the European Bauhaus, then actually, if we apply them to religious heritage buildings, we can see that we have actually adhered to these standards for centuries, I think you can say. So if we take them one by one, so if we start with the sustainabilities, when you think of old heritage buildings, they are actually built to last for centuries, which is, I think, standards that, well, are not that common in a lot of buildings that are built today. The principle of reuse and adaptation to new needs and to constantly readapt the building is something that you can see well in religious heritage buildings, but just like in a lot of old heritage buildings, when there was a new part of the buildings added a few centuries later, there was something replaced, and so it was constantly work in progress. And I think this is, again, something which adheres actually to the Bauhaus principles of taking what you've got, modernizing it, working with what you've gotten, being sustainable in what you're doing. Also in today's world, religious heritage buildings provide contributions, in my opinion, to mitigate and adapt to climate change. You might think of projects that are installing solar panels on church roofs and then providing green energy to the community, for example, provided that monumental protection allows that. Also, we've seen in heat waves that old church buildings that have been built centuries ago have actually become places for people to get cooling spaces and to find some relief there. So I think these buildings, if we look purely at the buildings, actually can make a contribution to sustainability and also to adapting to climate change. When we look at beautiful, then, I mean, of course, it's always in the eye of the observer, but I think religious heritage buildings are actually designed to be beautiful, to contribute to the glorification of God. I mean, that's basically the motivation behind this. And I think that aesthetically, you would agree that beautiful is not the major problem here. So they are nice to look at. And in many cases, the religious buildings do constitute cultural artifacts that are cherished by the community, that actually provide a sense of identity to the local community. Now, if we look at the last principle of the new European Bauhaus, which is together and socially inclusive, if you look at the history of religious places of worship, this has actually always been designed as a place of cross-cutting society and of social cohesion. This is basically a place where all members of the community would meet, irrespective of their social background. irrespective of how much money they've got, what trade they do. This is basically a place where people come together and where you would find all members of society joined together. I think this is a very important factor of social cohesion. And even today, with dropping attendance rates at services, when the people are not that often going to services anymore, you can see that these buildings still serve as a joint place of identification and as a meeting space for the local community, especially in rural areas, but also in city areas, that these places are being used for people to meet from across society. So this is a inclusion basically put into practice. But at the same time, churches are also places where social cohesion is actually shaped, and churches, other religious communities as well, but speaking from a church perspective here, have traditionally provided charity welfare to the community. If we look at Germany, just to put some numbers on it, the two major churches, so us being the Protestant Church and our colleagues from the Catholic Church, are the largest provider of social welfare in Germany. And just to put some numbers on it, our own welfare branch, Diakonie, has got some 600,000 employees. And on top of that, some 700,000 volunteers. And the number are even a bit larger, but more or less the same scale for our Catholic colleagues from Caritas and from the Catholic Church. So of course, not all of these social services are provided just inside church buildings, like old church buildings, but for a significant part they are. And these buildings also do serve as social, well, putting together social fabric. This is definitely the case in Germany. This is also the case in other member states of the European Union. So I do think that if you look at religious heritage buildings, then we do contribute to the Bauhaus principles quite a lot, also in terms of renovation, also in terms of refurbishment. And this is what we will look at in this session. Of course, there are some challenges that always will remain and that are there, such as with, as I said, dropping attendance rates. We do have an urgent issue of what to do with churches that are no longer in use. And we're looking for ways to maintain them, to reuse them, refurbish them in a way that will give back to community and to the local community. Climate adaptation is definitely a challenge for buildings that are built for different climate conditions than we are expecting in the coming decades and centuries. So we can see the need to adapt to different climate conditions. As always, we always have a need for accessible, non-bureaucratic funding, also from EU sources, such as the ERDF, from other sources. This is, of course, an issue that's ongoing. Also accompanying legal conditions concerning monument protection laws, for example. I mean, such as, are you allowed to put solar panels on your roof or not, if you've got a protected heritage building? State aid rules. And, well, rules that are there concerning funding and implementation. So all of that being said as a context, we hope to take you today on a journey to showcase some contributions of religious heritage buildings to the new European Bauhaus movement, and to elaborate on the way how these buildings can contribute to a more sustainable and inclusive society. So what we are going to do is we will have a short exercise to get started. After that, we will be honored to receive a keynote presentation from Ms. Anne Grady, who is a seconded cultural heritage national expert to the CULT Committee of the European Parliament. And after that, we will hear presentations of best practices from 3 countries, from the UK, from Germany, and from Belgium. And we're very much looking forward to hearing how then these principles of refurbishment of the Bauhaus are being put into practice. We will then have a short question and answer session and closing remarks, and by 12:30, we will close this event. Just short notice, if there are any questions during a presentation, either keep them in your mind or put them in the chat. In the question and answers session later on, we will just raise your yellow virtual hand and we will take your word. So thank you very much. I will hand over to Rocio for a short exercise. Oh, by the way, I did not introduce myself, actually. I just realized I just did not introduce myself. So my name is Ulrike Truderung. I am working for the Brussels office of the Protestant Church in Germany. I'm a policy officer on EU funding and providing advice to our members on how to access EU funding and having a special focus on cohesion policy. Thank you.
Okay, so now let's go to the quiz, the short quiz. Okay, we give a moment for people to join. Our guest speakers can participate as well if they wish. And sorry to everybody for the problem we had before with the link. Okay, so I think we can go with the first question. You have 30 seconds to answer.
I think you need to open it, actually.
Is it active?
Here you go.
No.
How many places of worship do you think there are in Europe?
Okay, well done. Well done with the first question. Now we move on to an open-ended question, which is, what do you think the main challenges of religious heritage are? And you can type your answers. We will then share these results with all of you after the session, together with the slides of the presenters. So funding, maintenance, and sustainability seem to be the biggest challenges of religious heritage in the 21st century. We will address that through the presentations. Okay, and I think we can move on to the next one. What generates more emissions, reusing a building or building a new one? Okay, I think that for most of you, you got it right. Building a new building has more emissions than reusing one that is already there. And the last question is, do you know any examples of reuse of religious buildings? Maybe in your village, your town, in your area? Or a national famous example of reuse of a religious building? Try saying which one instead of yes. We see the Urlau Abbey, Hopper Synagogue in Krakow, local churches transformed into mountain refuge. The library in Maastricht is a very famous one. the digital church in Aachen. And well, some of the uses are as a museum, as an apartment, as a hotel, as a cafe. Many of them as cultural venues. Okay, so I think that was it to get into the topic. And now I give you the floor, Ulrich, to introduce the keynote speaker.
Yes, thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Anne Grady as our keynote speaker for today, who will give us an introduction into the topic of today. So Anne is a seconded cultural heritage expert from her role as head of department. Now I have to look at my notes so that I don't get anything wrong, with the National Museum of Ireland, and she's seconded to the Cult Committee of the European Parliament. And in this function, she coordinates and assists members in drafting non-legislative papers and reports opinions, and defines policy line in addition to advising the European Commission on these subjects. So with the role in the National Museum, Anne was responsible for a number of areas, including ICT, governance, business planning, and the development of a wide range of museum activities, policies, guidelines, and developing the strategy there. And in her role as a seconded expert with the European Commission, she has been key in managing the European Year of Cultural Heritage, which took place in 2018. And you've led a member states working group on the subject of sustainable cultural tourism. I hope I got it all correct, and Anne, we're very grateful to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you very much, Ulrika. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And also thank you to FRH, in particular, the team here in Brussels, Jordi and Rosia. Big thank you. And for me, it's very timely and a valuable occasion to present and to be the keynote speaker at this event. Thank you for the introduction. So why am I here? I'm here to talk about strengthening cultural heritage resilience for climate change. And it's actually an open method of coordination group, which I led with when I was with the European Commission, with DG EAC. So if I could have the next slide, thank you. So what is the European Union's competency in relation to culture and cultural heritage? Because sometimes there's confusion out there about what does the European Union do and what's it responsible for? So it assists and complements the actions of member states in preserving and promoting the heritage. And you mentioned, Eureka, thank you, the European Year of Cultural Heritage, which was really, it was iconic and it really worked very well. And also the Union develops policies and programmes, and it supports and promotes policy collaboration between the member states and stakeholders on heritage. And we have projects and programmes such as the new European Bauhaus, Creative Europe and Horizon Europe. And I just want to mention, when I'm talking about climate change, it's really not that new with the European Union, because 20 years ago, a project was funded called Noah's Ark, and it dealt with the global climate change impact on built heritage and also on cultural landscapes. So if I could have my next slide. Thank you. So what is an open method of coordination? Well, it's where the member states come together and they appoint experts from their ministries, institutes, boards and agencies. And this one, dealing with climate change, was set up under the last Work Plan for Culture. We had 55 experts from 28 countries who met over 18 months. I had the honour of leading the group, and Dr. Johanna Leisner was our wonderful chair. The group was a really enthusiastic and dedicated bunch of people. They came from 25 member states, plus Norway, Switzerland and Iceland. And that brings me on to my next slide. So this OMC group, looking at climate change and heritage, we worked under the title Strengthening Cultural Heritage Resilience for Climate Change. And the mandate's quite long, but in that mandate, it actually makes a specific reference to the SDG 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts, to do it now. So my next slide, please. So the objectives of this group, what do we set up? What are we going to do? And under the mandate, it was to identify and exchange good practices and innovative measures for the protection of cultural heritage. And this actually included both tangible and intangible. To look at the current and emerging threats and the impacts of climate change on cultural heritage. So we know what's happening now, but what's also coming around the corner. And to look at the contribution cultural heritage can make to combating climate change. And this is very much in line with the European Green Deal's goals. So that brings me on to my next slide. Thank you. As part of the group, we did a lot of things, but we debated long and hard about what to put on the cover of our final report. And we thought this image of the Acropolis under snow sent a very, very strong message about climate change and heritage. Next slide, please. So we did a survey, we met, we heard presentations, but a key thing that we did as part of our group is we collected 83 case studies from 25 countries. Now, these case studies mainly relate to the tangible cultural heritage. There are some intangible, but it's mainly tangible. And a third of those are actually research projects. The focus is very much on sustainability and safeguarding. So it's all very much within the ethos of the new European Bauhaus. The key points that came from these case studies, and there are 83, so the key points is heritage is threatened by climate change, but it also offers solutions and inspiration to the crisis. The role of research and innovation is really important, and as I mentioned, a third of the projects are research. Many, not all, many traditional buildings are sustainable and climate friendly. And it's more climate friendly, according to our report, and this goes back to the Slido, Rosia, it's more climate friendly to upgrade, repair than to demolish and rebuild. And of course, continuous monitoring and maintenance is vital. 83 case studies, so I just want to, I'm not going to go through them all, I don't have the time. So I just want to talk about a small selection, and we have Sweden. And what happened here was a checklist for property owners of these unique and very, very special church towns, run by the County Administrative Board of Norrbotten. Gammelstead in the Gulf of Bothnia is one of the best preserved examples of church villages. And it's really, really fascinating about these wooden houses. There's over 400 of them, are clustered around a 15th century stone church. And they're used on Sundays when the weather is really bad and they can't get back home. So what happened? They produced a short, concise brochure with a very easy to use checklist. It presents 11 areas of possible uses, and it uses text and pictures, so it's not all just dialogue. And it offers examples of concrete action for what property owners can do. Norway, environmental monitoring. And this is a programme that started in 2017, and it monitors climate impact over a period of 35 to 50 years by the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research. So it's a long-term project, it's continuing. They're monitoring climate change on wooden and stone buildings from the medieval age, and includes 2 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, Røros and Bryggen. The project provides knowledge for better management of valuable medieval buildings and also other traditionally built buildings. And a good example of the monitoring development of climate impact is the medieval Gamostav Church in Lillehammer. So Portugal, and this is where we move to AI and digital. So they're using artificial intelligence, and they're monitoring 3 buildings at the focus, and they're in northern Portugal, and I did have the honour of visiting them some years ago. So it's a prototype that they're setting up. They're using satellite data together with 3D scanning, and alphanumerical data is being used for the monitoring potential in the positioning of the buildings, and they can monitor any minor structural movements or change. Then moving on to Spain, and this is a preventive conservation research project by the Cultural Heritage Institute of Spain, and it's looking at museums, research centres, the representatives on the project are from museums, research centres, universities, national institutions, and many, many member states, but it also includes North America, which is quite interesting. A diagnostic tool has been prepared for the curators and scientists working on the conservation of heritage collections, and it allows staff to know the risk situation when there's a change in the weather. It brings together recent knowledge and techniques on how different environmental factors affect the works of art, and in particular, they're looking at oil on canvas. And at the same time, they're also developing a digital platform for making preventative conservation decisions. And my next slide brings me on to something very close to my heart. Of course, I'm going to talk about Ireland. And this is Skellig Michael in County Kerry. It's managed by the state body, the Office of Public Works. And it's a monastic site dealing from the 6th century, 13 kilometres off the coast with a unique ecosystem. And it comprises these stone beehive huts with 618 steep steps. And they are steep. I've actually done it a few times. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and its popularity increased tremendously because it was used as a film location for Star Wars. But the problem here are the rising sea levels. It's in the Atlantic, and the heavy rainfall too that it experiences, and it's causing damage to the retaining walls, and this causes rock falls. So what the OPW, the Office of Public Works, is doing, they're conducting drone surveys. And they're also dismantling and rebuilding the walls, and they're installing crash decks to collect the falling rocks to prevent damage to the site. They have a 10-year management plan. They have a climate vulnerability assessment. But a really, really interesting fact, it's one of 10 sites that have been selected by COMECE to take part in a major global research project. It's the only site in Europe. And 2 lead sites of this project is Petra in Jordan and the rice fields in the Philippines. So my next slide, please. Italy, we all know about Italy and the weather and the impact on Venice and so on. So this case study is managed by many, or it involves many public administrations, many, including the church, of course. And they're developing ways of managing hydraulic defence tools, and they're looking at it from a territorial scale, an urban scale, and an architectural scale. And there's a very complex example of St. Mark's Basilica, where it's often flooded with salt water. And you probably all remember in November 2019 and the images that went round on the TV and media. They're availing of traditional and new techniques in protecting Venice, and particularly St. Mark's Basilica. And if anybody's been there recently, you'll have noticed the glass barriers have been installed around the perimeter of the Basilica to ensure the floors are kept dry when there's high tides. And also within Venice, there's an INSAR satellite project going on. And this is looking at the 90 bell towers of the city. So Croatia, the art of dry stone walling. Why am I talking about dry stone walling at this event? The reason is, well, it's threefold. One, it's a really good example of intangible cultural heritage. It's a good example of what we can learn from heritage in relation to the climate crisis, and also the European Year of Skills, which was last year and is actually running into part of this year. It's a focus on vernacular architecture and specifically the dry stone techniques in Croatia and Eastern area and throughout Europe. The dry stone walls are an attraction in their own right, and they're aesthetically very pleasing, and this harmony going on with the environment. They're durable. They can withstand harsh weather conditions such as frost. But the skills are also part of the intangible UNESCO representative list in 2018. They play a vital role in preventing floods and avalanches, and they combat erosion, and therefore they enhance biodiversity. And this project, this case study, is actually very much involved in training and passing on this knowledge with a focus on young people and volunteering. So in summary, we know that climate change affects cultural heritage, but the data out there is mostly on immovable heritage, very little on intangible. And even at that, there's a lack of qualitative and quantitative data. There's very little, as I said, on intangible heritage, and the main threats are severe precipitation, floods, heat waves, droughts, and sea level rise. And we have 10 recommendations. And what can we learn from these recommendations? It's important to have cross-sectorial cooperation at all levels. We feel there's a need for a digital platform to exchange information and expertise. But we also felt there should be an emphasis on the national and regional authorities, that they should be involved in this fight against the climate change and in protecting cultural heritage. And we felt there's a need for data on the economic costs for climate change and adaptation and mitigation solely for cultural and natural heritage. Awareness raising what's happened, there's been unprecedented interest in this report, and there's been presentations throughout the EU and beyond, and actually at the FRH conference last year in London at COP26. And this is the first time ever an open method of coordination report has been presented to the European Parliament. There's an interest from the US National Park Service and also the British Museum. The European Bauhaus Festival, which this is why we're all here today, and I've just put in the link there, and I am encouraging people, if you are in Brussels, to go to Parc de Saint-Quentin to see what's happening about the festival. And if you can't go, there's also a lot of information and streaming online. So my next slide, and very quickly, I want to mention the survey that the FRH recently conducted, because it's important to mention that people really, really care about heritage. And this survey actually proves that point. They care about religious heritage. I think it's a really, really good survey. I provide a link at the end of my presentation, and I suggest, thank you, Jordi, that's the link. I suggest people have a look at the survey and to see the information that's provided there. So additional information, there's a link to the OMC report, Climate Change Network Plan, a whole lot of reports and a huge amount of information. There's also the, you mentioned funding earlier, there's the Culture EU funding guide, and also an interesting workshop that was conducted on complementary funding for cultural heritage, and it's worth having a look at the results of that. I would also like to encourage people who are EU citizens to vote in June, from the 5th or 6th of June, for the parliamentary elections. Please vote, use your vote, and use it sensibly. And to finish, my last slide, thank you. Why are we doing this? I said there's a huge interest in heritage and religious heritage. We're safeguarding it for future generations. And you may have heard this quote before, but I think it's really, really important and it's really relevant. The greenest building is the one already built. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for these inspirational words. And I think actually the last quote really takes us to the core of what we're doing here today. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
With an eye to the time, I would suggest that we shortly ask if there are any direct questions to Anne about what she's doing. Otherwise, if there are no immediate questions for understanding, I suggest that we move on quickly to the practical examples that we would like to present on how to reuse, refurbish, and adopt churches that exist. And our first presentation is from Alexander McCallion, who is the Director of Works and Precinct at York Minster, and who oversees the maintenance, restoration, and conservation of York Minsters, and who has led the development of a master plan for the precinct, which he will present to us now. So, Alexander, thank you very much for being here today. The floor is yours. We're very curious to hear what you've got to say.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to this very important group on the work I've been leading on at York Minster for the past 7 years. I hope I can do it justice in 15 minutes. So I'm sure many of you know York Minster. You might not be aware that the Minster sits within a precinct extending to, I seem to have a technical issue. Oh, here we go. Extending to just under 7 hectares of York city centre, and it's an incredibly complex part of the city. We have 53 properties, all of which are listed, so they're protected by statutory legislation. 3 of the buildings are grade 1 listed, including York Minster. All of the estate is scheduled, meaning I can't put a spade in the ground deeper than 6 inches without permission from central government. And everything that we do is under enormous scrutiny. York Minster is a building of international importance, with the largest in situ collection of medieval stained glass in England. It's subject to extensive scholarly research. So when I started this process of looking how we could create a sustainable future for the Minster, I was really starting from a position of The answer's no. What's the question? Because there was no planning policy to support any changes within the precinct. In England, every local planning authority since 1947 has been required to have a development plan for their area, which sets specific development criteria. York hasn't had an adopted local plan since 1958. So there is no adopted planning policy to deliver change. So what I did, I used the Localism Act, which was adopted in 2011, to create my own bespoke planning policy to deliver the changes that you're about to see, to ensure that we have a sustainable future to the end of this century. And when I talk about sustainability, I'm referring to three core strands: financial sustainability, so we've always got the money to care for this incredibly complex estate; environmental sustainability, which is obvious; and heritage craft skills. So we've always got the skills on site to care for this very precious and complex building and estate. So in terms of finances, just to put it into perspective, it costs £33,000 a day to run and care for York Minster. And we receive no regular central government or Church of England funding. All of the English cathedrals are responsible for their own fiscal management, and we rely incredibly heavy on paying visitors. So we're back to pre-COVID levels of about 750,000 visitors a year, but during COVID that number completely fell off the cliff, and our income saw a catastrophic loss. We were incredibly lucky to be funded by York Minster Fund, whose core charitable objective is to raise funds for the care of York Minster. Without that money, we'd have been in a very, very serious situation. Environmentally, we are seeing, even in the 7 years I've been at York Minster, increased rainfall. I mean, this winter has been atrocious. We cannot get the water off the cathedral quickly enough. And we're seeing saltation of the salt, of the magnesium lime salt, and rapid cavernous decay. The extent of conservation and repair required of this magnificent building is overwhelming at times. And at the moment, we're focusing on the south choir aisle, which is about 10% of the building. It's frightening. And some of these photographs, I could show you worse, just show the scale of the stone renewal that's needed. And of course, the Church of England quite rightly has set a very ambitious target for us to get to net zero by 2030, and that's reflected by City of York Council. Now, how on earth do you get to net zero with no planning policy or a plan on how to get there? So, and of the 42 Anglican cathedrals, only 13 still have functioning works departments. So I'm incredibly privileged to lead the team at York who look after the Minster, but and we're the largest surviving stone yard in the country. But the cost of my team is so enormous to look after the building, that isn't sustainable either. So if we don't do something, we're not going to be here in 10 years' time. And then who is there to care for the Minster? And this slide shows you the extent of statutory measures that sit above me, all of the permissions that I'm required to secure before I can do anything on the cathedral or around, orbited by all of our stakeholders who are all incredibly influential and, of course, concerned about the cathedral to make sure it's properly cared for. So a very long story short, I had very limited options within which to develop a master plan. I brought forward the master plan as a neighbourhood plan, utilising the Localism Act, which was adopted in 2011, to effectively create a zonal plan of the precinct with bespoke planning policy sitting behind each of those zones. Sustainability is the golden thread running through the document, which I based on the 17 UN goals. That has guided the principles of development and change within the precinct, specifically around the net zero and heritage adaptation, which we're leading on, but also the well-being of the city, how important our cultural heritage is to us and how important our green spaces are to the visitors of York and the residents of York. So multifaceted, complicated document delivering significant change. We've now secured 9 major consents on the back of this in a very short space of time. The beauty of the extensive consultation that's taken place, 32 weeks in total over 4 years, has meant that we've de-risked all of the planning applications before they've gone in to ensure that the public, our community, our stakeholders are behind what we're doing, and that is key. Otherwise, people feel you're forcing these changes on them, which leads to objections and a protracted approach to planning. So the York Minster Refectory, which opened last year, is the first retrofit project on a listed building in York. Most importantly, this includes solar slates. So you can see Canon Michael blessing the roof here. The solar slates from a distance look like Welsh slate. They're actually creating the power that are running the air source heat pumps that are heating the building. And that building has secured an energy rating of B. It didn't get an A because we couldn't put double glazed windows in or secondary glazing, but a B is extraordinary. Normally, all of my buildings will fail their EPC rating. And we were very lucky that His Majesty opened that after Royal Maundy for us last year. This is a major consent, a choir roof. It's the size of 6 tennis courts, south facing. It's ideal for solar panels. You wouldn't even have suggested that 5 years ago. It's a core policy of our neighbourhood plan that we want to put solar panels on the roof. And last year we secured planning permission to put 199 solar panels on the roof. They'll produce a third of the power needed to run the Minster, and those will be on the building and operational next year. That application didn't receive one major objection. It didn't even go to planning committee. It was approved under delegated authority, again showing the power of consultation and de-risking. College Green is a major urban regeneration project creating a new public park in the city, underutilised space. This is now complete. We've increased biodiversity with special planting, sculptural benches. It's a really active space. St William's College, this is a 15th century building. We've got all of the consents to retrofit this, to put lifts in, ground source and air source heat pumps. This will become chapters, principal offices in due course. This is number 1 Deangate. This doesn't look particularly glamorous, but this is a really important retrofit project. It's a listed building. We've secured permissions to put a warm roof on, again with solar slates generating the power. But what's really important about this consent is we've got permission to put double glazed wooden sliding sash windows in. That might not seem a lot, but it's massive in York. So how do you retrofit and insulate a building with single glazed windows? It's an utter nonsense. And so this has set a precedence that I want to build on. These windows from the ground, you will not be able to tell they're double glazed, but they will make such a difference to the energy performance of that building. This is a statue of the late Queen that we installed 2 years ago, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And this is our Centre of Excellence. This is a visionary project which has established the Minster as an international centre of excellence for heritage craft skills and estate management. We're working with a number of European partners on this where we want to share knowledge. We've borrowed knowledge from you and shared knowledge that we've got. And create a campus facility for heritage training. So this is the Heritage Quad, where our stonemasons will be based, where we're building residential accommodation for our 1st and 2nd year apprentices and our visiting apprentices. This is the city walls, which will sit behind the facility, means our visitors can look down and engage in the process of heritage craft and the sustaining of these skill sets that have been based at the Minster since the 11th century. Sustainability sits at the heart of this development. So the building to the left is covered in solar panels, which are generating the power to run the air source heat pumps that will heat the building. They'll also light most of the offices. It's been built broadly to passive house standards, so very low energy consumption. The central roof structure is collecting rainwater, which flushes the loos and waters the garden. And the building to the right is has a living green roof. So again, increasing biodiversity. And some views in here, in the first working gargoyles in the precinct since the 16th century, where they'll shoot the water from the roof out. This is the technology hub, where we're investing in state-of-the-art cutting technology as a tool to support the craft at the Minster. So this will be sitting in a beautiful new building. Under this roof, all of those roof curvatures are covered in a state-of-the-art solar panel. that will produce all of the power needed to operate the offices. So all of the lights, the air heating in the winter and the air cooling in the summer. So a huge step forward. By Christmas, we will be producing 40% of the power needed to run the estate on site through all of these renewables that we're putting in. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to whistle through these slides, I'm afraid. But the creation of the statue of the Queen was used embracing this blend of traditional craft skills and cutting edge technology. So it's the moment has passed for a purist approach to preserving these heritage assets. We are embracing technology to support what we're doing because, as I mentioned, the scale of restoration is overwhelming. So we need to be doing more restoration for the same budget more efficiently. And we're going to be doing that using technology. But what the statue of the Queen has proved is that we're not diluting any of our craft skills. We're not mechanizing the whole process. It's a fine balance of the two to achieve beautiful public art of international importance. And so we used a milling machine to support the preparation of the stone. And you can see here all of the various levels that we could have used the stone to. In the end, Richard Bossons, who was the mason who designed the statue and created it, he asked the machine to go down to 0.5 millimeter. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the reference points to complete the statue by hand. And so this is a saw similar to the one that we'll be putting into our technology hub. But what the saw is doing is the roughing out stage of the craft process. So the laborious, boring bits, really. So that'll be done by machine. But what took the machine 160 hours at a slower speed because of the significance of the asset, it would have taken Richard 4 months just to do that bit. So you can see this is a little microcosm of how we are going to be addressing the stone renewal at the Minster as a direct response to climate change and extreme weather, which is the greatest threat to the Minster. So in summary, we've partnered with institutions around the world, particularly with our European friends, to create this centre. We hope people will come and learn from us and learn what we're doing, both in terms of heritage craft, but estate management and how we are addressing the climate emergency. And the point I make regularly is if we can do it at York, under every layer of heritage protection and English planning law, you'll have similar versions, then there's no excuse for everyone else not to be doing their bit to address the climate crisis outside of the heritage sector. So I hope that was interesting. I'm conscious my 15 minutes is up. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk to you today.
Thank you very, very much, Alexander, for these inputs. And I think it was very interesting to look at what you're doing, York, and what you're doing also in terms of sustainability and the green impact. So that's really impressive. We are now moving, with an eye to the time, we're now immediately moving on to our next speaker, which is Mr. Tobias Funke, who is representing one project which is very much focused on the social inclusion and reuse of existing church buildings, which is Dresden Youth Church. So Tobias studied theology and Jewish studies in Leipzig, Halle, and in Jerusalem, and has been a pastor in Dresden since 2017. And since 2022, he's been a youth pastor in the newly built Youth Church Youth Center, is that correct? Which he will also present to us now. And I'm quite excited to hear about that because they've done really great things there. So Tobias, the floor is yours. And we're pleased to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your kind introduction. You see the slide? Yes. I will take you to our new youth center, Jugendkirche Dresden, which opened in 2022. I've entitled the presentation with the 3 keywords of the new European Bauhaus: beautiful, sustainable, and together. They fit also very well to our building. Before we take a look inside the building, and its new use, I'd like to show you a short video that we made during the construction period. It's already 2 years old, but it's give you a good idea of the environment in which Jugendkirche is established. Trinitatis Kirche, it's centrally located between the River Elbe and the Great Garden in Dresden, built in 1884 during the Wilhelmine period when Dresden was growing and new churches were needed. The church accommodated a congregation of 10,000 worshippers, built of local stone, Saxon sandstone, and Rochlitz porphyry on the outside, but with brickwork and steel elements on the inside. The church is typical building of its time. The church was destroyed in Second World War, leaving only the tower and the outer walls standing. During GDR era, the church was demolished and used for open-air events, church services, and concerts until 2020. Since 1992, the church has been home to a social youth program founded by the city but supported by the church. Now our organization, the Protestant Youth, is the umbrella organization of all youth work in the city. Since 2000, the organization has been looked for a new central location. The decision to convert this church ruins in the youth church was a realization of a long dream to have a center located for events in addition to offices and storage space. A competition was organized with the aim to create a building to 15 workplaces, an event location for 200 to 300 people, and building was realized from 2020 to 2022. The project was founded by the European Regional Development Fund and costs about 6 million. Here you can see a cross-section from the former Trinitatis Church ruin, and from the outside you don't see so easy that something has changed. But in the open section you can see the offices wing, which is behind the big windows here, and also the facilities and storage rooms in the tower, and a big hall down here for 200 to 300 people, which can be used by multifunctional purposes. In the basement, there's a maker space and musician room. Yeah, now to the topic of beautiful. Wherever you enter the youth church, you notice the aesthetics of this place. The combination of old elements, bricks and porphyry, with new elements of glass and steel has its own beauty. The combination marks the breaks of its history. The fractures of the wall have not been retouched and remain clearly visible as a sign of remembrance. But the new building materials clearly indicate a new use. Now to the point of sustainable. The building is sustainable in different aspects. First and foremost, it's sustainable because of the refurbishment of the existing building, and large amounts of gray energy have been used and revitalized. Sooner or later, the church ruin would have been to completely renovated, even if it's had used as an open air venue. The building itself is also energy sustainable, as the thick church walls and roof ensure good energy efficiency. In addition, a ventilation system with heat recovery in the winter and cold recovery in the summer has been installed, resulting in significant energy savings. The youth church is supplied with the district heating from a combined heat and power plant. As a youth organization, we also signed up in the church Grüner Hahn, it's called. It's a system on the base of European eco-management and autism. The building is also sustainable in ecological sense for its habitat of several species as crescents, yokdals, and bats. And we have also installed a camera on the tower for environment education purposes. The youth center system is also in social sense as a meeting and learning place for different people in different backgrounds. In the makerspace in the basement, you can repair and learn how to make things by your own hands. The repair cafe is planned for the neighborhood. In the band room, you can make music or meet other people to make music together. At the bar area and inside, social workers approve their hands and to deal with the people who are coming with their everyday problems, but also you can go at the active area and to play table tennis, table football, or other games. And the third point, coming together. The church center has become a meeting place for a wide variety of groups in the neighborhood and in the city of Dresden. It's existing with different milieus come together, regional negotiation process take place. All issues of inclusion on our table. Traditional church services and concerts can celebrate it, but also parties or receptions are held. Modern technology allows us also film screenings and live events. As example, last month we had a live event with a Holocaust survivor from Krakow and over 200 children, school children. Next month we will hold also a event in preparing for the European elections with members of the youth from the parties. The building can also use for workshops and camps, but simply also only to play table tennis every Thursday, or to have a summer kino, cinema, a disco, or also a ball now in the spring. Or even as classical for a wedding ceremony, just also as receptions, also some small prayers. Yeah, so you have seen around some impressions of our church, our youth center, and I hope you get good impressions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Funke. I really love this project, and I think it's also very inspiring for others. So thank you very much. As I said, we will take questions at the end of the presentations, just to pile them up together. So we are moving on to our third and final project example from Belgium. So Wel de Ridder will present to us the platform Toekomst Parochiekerken, so the Flemish Future of Parish Churches platform. Joel was a services researcher at Hasselt University until 2022, working for municipalities and church boards and developing policy plans and trajectories. And starting in October, he has been the coordinator of the platform that he will present to us now, which is serving as, and I think you will explain all of this in greater detail, but who is serving as a collaboration platform between the Religious Heritage Organization, PASM, and the Flemish Umbrella Organization of Municipalities. And I think at this point, you can better explain what you're doing than I can. So, well, welcome. Thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation as well. I'll present to you very quickly the Flemish situation in which the parish churches in Flanders find themselves today. And also present very quickly the platform and then some contemporary examples of reuse of church buildings in Flanders. So key in the present situation, or in the situation in Flanders in general, are the actors involved. We have a system in Belgium of fabric committees or church boards, groups of 5 volunteers that take care of one parish church, and they manage all Belgian parish churches, these fabric committees. So more or less there are as many fabric committees as there are parish churches. And they do this for the churches that are still in use as churches or that are only partially reused. And they do that with their own means, which are often insufficient. Their own means, and that's why the municipalities in Belgium, not only in Flanders, but in Belgium, are obliged to supplement this so financially. So that in order for the bills to check out. In Brussels, there's a new policy that the municipalities only can support up to 30% of the costs, but more or less in general in Belgium, municipalities are obliged to supplement the costs of the church in order for the bills to check out, and the municipalities are also obliged to provide a home for the priests. The Flemish regional government provides renovation and restoration subsidies, and the Belgian federal state pays the priests, and the bishops, of course, have the final say on what happens inside the buildings. After withdrawal from worship, Fabric Committee will be merged into a larger Fabric Committee. It's following the scale of the parishes then, and the building ends up with its original owner, which is either the municipality or the Fabric Committee. And this time the building will be private property. Most buildings built before 1800 are owned by the municipalities today, and most buildings post 1800 are owned by the fabric committees. And ownership can, of course, change. And there are Flemish parish churches. So as to the current approach in Flanders, the reuse of parish churches is a fairly new phenomenon. It's well on the way since, let's say, 2011, and there was this first wave between 2011 and 2021. Due to these financial safety nets, the decrease in the number of believers and priests has only had an effect on this in the sense of withdrawals with a delay because of this safety nets. And parish churches are also seen in Flanders and in Belgium explicitly as public buildings, and many actors are involved, these fabric committees, the municipalities, the Flemish administration, the Flemish government, architect, heritage organization, dioceses, and the bishops' conference. And since 2011, from the local partners, the Flemish government expects a vision of the future of the parish churches belonging to their territory. So a vision on all the parish churches on the territory of a municipality. And this vision, we call it in Dutch, Kerkenbeleidsplan. It will be obliged for all municipalities starting from 2025, so next year. In Flanders, there's a certain spirit of cooperation as it comes to the future of these buildings and with means coming from different angles. Now, as to the platform I'm coordinating, we're a small entity with 3.5 full-time equivalents, and we operate from, as was told in the introduction as well, from the umbrella organization of all 300 Flemish municipalities, in Dutch VWSG. So the Vereniging van Vlaamse Steden en Gemeenten, the Association of Flemish cities and municipalities. And then Parcum is also in the platform. Parcum is an expertise center for religious heritage, Flemish expertise center. The platform was installed in 2022 by the Flemish government, And we are embedded in the full scope of the challenge of the future of the parish churches. And we're also embedded in a very complex network of actors. And we try to respond to the real questions that come from municipalities and fabric committees as to the future of the parish churches. So questions can be on architecture and heritage, qualities of buildings, possibilities of buildings. It can be on urban development, urban preconditions regarding the future, or needs in the area for which churches maybe can provide space. Feasibility, and especially financial feasibility, legal arrangements, management structures, and then things related to participation, such as social and pastoral support for the future of these buildings. So that's the scope of the platform. And what we do, the functions of the platform are the following. We are an information point for municipalities and fabric committees. So both of those instances can come to us with their questions. We communicate on the team. We have this recent tradition of dialogue with policy actors, mostly on a Flemish level. We monitor the situation of the parish churches in Flanders, and we educate on several topics, such as how to make a policy plan for all the church buildings on the territory of one municipality, for example. And most importantly, we help and support municipalities and fabric committees on their requests for advice, their policy plans, how to deal with private initiative in the future of parish churches, and how to manage, and that's the most difficult task, maybe, how to manage trajectories of partial or full reuse of church, and I'll go into that a bit more. So how to manage these trajectories of reuse or partial reuse. We help municipalities and fabric committees out with subsidies, how to find mostly Flemish subsidies. We help them out with procedures, how to find the right architect, for example, or other procedures, the more legal procedures. And we help them out, most importantly, how to draw up a plan of action, how to find the right expertise on the right time, and how to set out the right actions through time. And this plan of action can involve participation, how to deal with architecture, both old and new, and urbanism, how to deal with heritage questions, both immovable and movable, how to deal with financial aspects, and how to deal with questions of future management of churches. So that's what we help the municipalities and the fabric committees on. Then to finish this presentation, I'll show some contemporary examples of parish churches that have been reused over the last couple of years. And I've selected the 7 examples that are, let's say, architecturally the most interesting, in my opinion. I also teach architecture theory at the Catholic University of Leuven, and I was involved in a cultural association dealing with architecture as well. But in Flanders and in Brussels, we have an excellent architecture scene for the last, let's say, 20 or 25 years, since the Flemish government architect was installed in 1999 or 2000. We have this flourishing architecture scene, and you see that expressed in the new examples of some of these reused churches. I chose some projects that have an eye for the role of religion as well, that have an eye for heritage, and that have an eye for an added social value. We see many rather soft solutions as to the future of these parish churches in Flanders because of the publicness of these buildings. They are public buildings, and the examples I show still are. Their embeddedness also helps to foster these rather soft solutions, embeddedness and networks of actors. And also we have the spirit of cooperation between church and state and municipalities and fabric committees and so on. And of course, we have public funding, which helps a lot. First example, St. Cornelius Aalbeke, close to the city of Kortrijk, which is a combination, as you might see in the plan, of a church and the choir part of the church building, which is extended a bit. And then in the northern part, there's a music school. And in the southern part, there's a library, a small village library, which you can see in the picture bottom left. And then the picture top right is, let's say, the central hall, which can be used for the music school, but also for the library and even for the church community, which is still present, be it in a somewhat smaller room. Next example, the most fancy example we have in Flanders, very expensive. So it cost more than the one in Dresden we saw before, but not much more. This is a combination of church, as you can see top right, and cultural center. You can see the seating top left and right of the picture, and also bottom right, you can see the seating in the let's say second part of this church. The model bottom left helps out to situate where each part is. So in the choir area, you see still the church room, and in the back of the church with these wooden houses that are built in there for additional functions such as meeting room. That's more the cultural part of the church. From the same architectural office, much more modest, pretty small church, although it might look big on the outside, but it's quite small. Multi-purpose with some simple introduction of some new architectural elements, such as this blue veil in steel, behind which you find a staircase leading to the oxaal, we say in Dutch, where the organ is in many churches. And then on the left, behind this veil, you see a kitchen area, and on the right, there's a bathroom area. It's multi-purpose. It's not really a church anymore, but it can be used for, let's say, small, intimate activities. It still has the atmosphere of a church. That's restored quite nice. This example is combination of exhibition room, multi-purpose room in the volume that's inside of the church in the middle, and then the back, so the nave, more or less, it's a columbarium, so a cemetery in which urns can be placed in these new wooden columns. Next example, very, very new. I don't think it's in use yet, but architecturally it's finished very recently, Heilig in Ghent. It's a social center for this neighborhood in the eastern part of the city of Ghent. And as you can see, there's this new floor supported by this wooden structure, which is still quite high on the floor level. it's a generous room, and on top of that is an even more generous room, as you can see on the top left, by the Smet Vermeulen, which is a very, very interesting architecture firm from Ghent. This is the modern
I have
church.
to shortly jump in with an eye to the time. I think you will have to wrap up very soon.
Yeah, it's the second to last example. So this is a listed building, a listed modern building by the architect De Sauvage, and it's turned into a library in Vosselaar and also community center. And then the last one is a daycare center in a modern church in Eeklo, near Ghent, in which new kind of furniture was placed on top even of the existing furniture. Very difficult building with sloping parts. And still, the architects turned this into a functional daycare center. As you saw in lots of these examples, a lot of the solutions are found actually in furniture. So not in big architectural gestures, but more in furniture, new furniture in these rooms to make them into something new. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for that.
Thank you very, very much, Gwen, for this insight from Flanders. And again, I think there's a lot of inspiration in there. With an eye to the time, I do have a lot of questions, but I can speak to you a lot. So I will just open up for all the participants, because I think there should be some questions. So please just raise your little yellow hand so we can see, and just ask any questions you might have about the project, about the presentation from Anne Grady that we had before. Who dares to go first? Yes, Ms. Snyder.
Hi, thanks for organizing this great event. And also to Alex, thank you for your amazing talk on the York Minster. I had the pleasure of seeing it myself once, and it was great to revisit that. My question is, how collaborative is your project at the moment with other medieval churches in England, especially 14th century churches? How much are you sharing, for example, in regards to solar panels? How far along is the rest of England in that regard? Thank you.
Alex, are you there? Okay, otherwise we'll is he not there? Is he kicked out?
I think perhaps he left because he had a flight today, so perhaps it's not in the room.
In that case, we'll just store that question and send it to him by email. So there was another question there, or is that?
No, because Alex isn't in the chat anymore. It was also regarding York. So yeah, but thank you so much, everyone, for the presentation.
Share his email address so you can ask questions directly. So yes. Are there any further questions? So maybe then I can ask it. Is Anne still there? We don't. Yes, there's one hand from Ms. Hatzinger.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the presentations and the statement at the beginning. That was very enriching and inspiring. My question would be to our colleague from Dresden, because it was sort of it became clear that the transformation was also possible with support of EU funding, and I was just interested in hearing about his experiences in accessing these funds and working with these funds, how complicated, how easy, how helpful he felt this experience was for him.
Yeah, thank you for this question. As I said, it was the European Regional Fund Development Areas, and EFRA in German. And it was a long process, but we get a lot of money from it, and it was very good also in the calculation. we get 80% of funding from the EU, 10% of the city, and 10% from the church. So it was also one situation for the city and the church. They shared the 20% they should give.
I think it's all the more important that this kind of funding continues. So that's what we're also working on here in Brussels. So thank you again for this input, and I think we will stress the need for continued funding of this kind. There's one question from Emilio.
Yes, thank you, Rika, and thank you to all that presented these examples. I was really struck by the diversity of these presentations. My question is more concerning awareness, because we talked about raising awareness about cultural heritage and especially religious heritage in Europe, in all the member states, where we see that the issues are very similar, and then we need solutions to tackle them in one way or the other. And I think it is very important to raise awareness among young generations, because those are the ones that in the future will have to take care of the reuse or the renovation of a church building, because I think they will have to take care of that once the churches and the church buildings, once our generation won't be there anymore. So my question would be to maybe the speakers that are left today, how can we improve a bit education about these topics, and how can we improve formation about the importance of religious heritage, which is very high today, as the research and the survey from FRH has shown. But can we involve the education sector also a bit more in these projects to raise awareness about that? I don't know if Roel or Tobias have an idea on that. Thank you.
Like to give it?
I can try to say something about it. I have the experience that it's quite hard to find a way to youth in order to, let's say, for example, collaborate on a vision or collaborate on the future of parish churches. I had the experience in participation projects on church buildings that unless you reach out very explicitly to, for example, youth organizations, younger people will delegate the thinking on the future of parish churches to older people. A lot of the times, as a kind of a token of respect, maybe for older generations, they think, well, church buildings, that's something for older generations to decide on, or to think on, or to envision new futures for, and so on. So one possibility is to reach out very explicitly to, for example, youth organizations, and also maybe it's the same in other countries in Europe, but in Flanders, a lot of the youth infrastructure, so the buildings where youth organizations are in, and the buildings they use for activities in the weekends, so the traditional scouting groups, for example, a lot of the, which is very, very popular in Flanders. A lot of the times these groups or these buildings are actually owned more or less by the Catholic Church in Flanders, so by the local divisions of the local Catholic associations. A lot of the times they own these buildings for the youth, and there's this rental system or something. So maybe through the future for their own infrastructure, the youth infrastructure, maybe that can be used as a I don't know, as a vehicle or something to also think about the larger scale, and also think about maybe the future of the church, which is a lot of the times it is related to each other, and it's this, more or less the same volunteers lots of the time that take care of the youth infrastructure and the church infrastructure. So this can be an advantage, maybe.
Yes, I can say in the same direction. We made this competition about the reuse or building of the youth church, and we have a process of involvement also from youth, and we need to encourage the youth to use this right. The youth is our they are the future, and not only of the church, also of all the heritage. And if they're encouraged, they like to be involved in all these processes. And we had a lot of discussion with the monument conversation stuff, what is allowed, what is not allowed. But we had the discussions also in other objects, that if there is nothing changed, the ruins are being ruins and not used anymore. And so we get a lot of opportunity to make a real involvement process for the youth.
Thank you so very much. And with 9 to the time, I would like to wrap up right now, and I would invite actually our co-organizers, so Jodi and Emilio, to draw some final conclusions. What are you taking out of this, and how do we go from here? Maybe Jodi, maybe you want to start. We cannot hear you, Jodi.
You can go ahead, Emilio.
Yes, thank you so much, Ulrike. Thank you to the presenters again. I think what I personally bring and take away from this webinar today is that through the 3 dimensions of the European Bauhaus, we can really ensure that religious heritage is preserved and renovated and reused in the ways that are most fitting to the purpose that people wanted to have, that are belonging to the religious building itself. And I think one of the points that I would like to highlight is really that of not only raising awareness, but ensuring that everybody is on board. So as we heard, there is always a consultation that has to be done, including all the stakeholders, religious, non-religious, public, the educational ones, the youth ones. And this is really not only to be done for the sake of cooperation per se, but also as a participative instrument for the benefit of the whole community and of the whole society. So this is, I think, one takeaway that I would like to highlight for today's conclusion.
Yes. So my name is Jordi Mayrak. I'm the Executive Officer at Future for Religious Heritage. And together with my colleague, also here present, Rocío Sanchez, we manage the network secretariat here in Brussels. And we're always happy to connect and support those working with to safeguard religious heritage in Europe. So feel free to contact us at any time. So as a conclusion of today's event, to add to what my colleague said, these new European Bauhaus principles of beautiful, sustainable together, clearly religious heritage sites are often the manifestation of these values. They're commonly the most beautiful buildings in any city or town, sustainable by its traditional building design and materials. And together, they've historically been the main and sometimes only gathering place for local communities, especially in rural areas. Even nowadays, religious buildings are often the only public building. And religious heritage sites are often considered very expensive to maintain, and their added societal benefit is often understated. So just to give an insight, the House of Good report by a member of our network, National Churches Trust, detailed that you receive between 3 times and 16 times return on the investment when investing in religious heritage buildings. So they quantified this with a consulting agency that identified that it's actually a 3-fold or up to a 16-fold return on investment in positive externalities. So either employment, local community development, hospitality industry, tourism, and so on. And likewise, similar benefits can arise from investing in sustainable solutions for these sites, retrofitting for insulation, renewable energy, or preserving the biodiversity of the grounds around religious heritage sites that often have churchyards and have a lot of biodiversity there. Regarding sustainability, it's also clear that the construction industry is one of the industries with the highest carbon emissions in Europe, especially, and new constructions have a much higher environmental impact than adapting and restoring an existing building. So just to highlight some takeaways from the speakers. So from the keynote speaker, Anne Grady, she pointed out that traditional buildings are sustainable and climate friendly, that upgrade and repair is often more climate friendly than demolishing these buildings. And of course, with the European Year of Skills, there are many craft skills that are vital to ensure the adequate maintenance and restoration of these wonderful heritage sites across Europe. And as she pointed out, FRH, the network, conducted a Europe-wide survey with educational institutions and craft skills artisans. Will soon publish the results, and it identifies the key needs and challenges of the sector. For example, one of the key challenges is, of course, knowledge transfer. Alex McCallion highlighted the challenges of maintaining and restoring religious heritage sites with the example of York Minster, the challenges of achieving net zero without a comprehensive strategy, how to balance cutting-edge technology with traditional craft skills. And with his example of York Minster, he highlighted the state-of-the-art design as well as an impressive renewable energy setup, which will cover almost half of the site's energy requirements. And this project was also the winner of the 2023 Religious Heritage Innovator of the Year Award, showcasing that religious heritage, which we don't often associate with innovation, actually brings a lot of innovation, especially regarding sustainability. Tobias Funke presented the example of the Dresden Youth Church, a church that was destroyed during the Second World War. It remained unused and in disrepair for many years. And then in the year 2000, the church was converted to an event and office space, which is a meeting and educational site welcoming the local community. And he put a big emphasis on sustainability. This emphasis was carried out throughout its restoration and future use, and it included the participation in a European eco-management and audit scheme to ensure the sustainability in the future. Rode Ritter, with future parish churches, they're establishing a very necessary link between church managers and church boards with public authorities in municipalities to ensure the safeguarding of these sites. He provided an overview of the situation in Flanders, including unique aspects of ownership with the fabric communities and municipalities. And it's interesting to note that the Flemish government is encouraging these plans called Vision for the Future of Parish Churches, which is a similar initiative that has already been taking place in the Netherlands. And these plans will now become a requirement in 2025. Often across Europe, there are no comprehensive plans on what to do with religious buildings, often those in disuse. So these plans are very forward-looking and very necessary. And finally, several contemporary examples were presented, showcasing how the adaptive reuse of religious buildings can ensure that the beauty and atmosphere of the buildings are maintained and ensure they continue being relevant for the community in the future. And to finish off, on behalf of the organizing partners, I'd like to thank all the participants for joining today's event. Many thanks for sharing your questions and insights. Special thanks to Anne Grady, Alex McCallion, Tobias Funke, and Rode Ritter for their very insightful presentations. And of course, many thanks to EKD and COMECE for helping and assisting in creating this wonderful joint event. We hope that it provided some useful information and examples of how religious buildings can be an asset for the future. So many thanks. The presentations and recordings will be made available for all participants. So in case you joined in late, you'll have a chance to watch it and share it with whoever you think might be interested. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much also on behalf of the EKD Brussels office, and thank you very much for attending. Thank you to the co-organizers, and I hope that you all get out of here with inspiration and motivation to continue this work. And also I take away that well, the Bauhaus is actually a good place for religious heritage, and that there are actually a lot of good examples there, that this is something that we have been doing for a long time, and I think we don't need to hide what we have achieved here. And I think that actually we all as communities, as well, churches, as religious communities, and as the ones representing religious heritage, such as FRH really can showcase a lot of examples where we have already contributed to the principles of the Bauhaus, and I think we're on a good track here. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for participating, and we hope to see you again at the next seminar. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.